Franklin Roosevelt called out the big lie. This is the, oh, by the way, that April Fool's joke courtesy of, over on Daily Kos of Bob Waterstripe. Good on you, Bob. That was a good one. All right. Donald Trump made really good use of the propaganda technique known as the big lie, but he didn't invent it or popularize it. I mean, you know, this strategy's been around as long as humanity has had psychopaths trying to seize political power. But it was really brought into pop consciousness in the 1930s. And I was going through my old audio library over the weekend, and I found this clip from Franklin Roosevelt talking about the big lie. And I'm going to play it out of my computer here in a minute, Sean. FDR, of course, was the man who saved America from the Republican Great Depression. That's what they called it up until the 1950s when President Eisenhower, a Republican, came into office, and you know the newspapers just stopped referring to it as the Republican Great Depression. FDR created Social Security. He created the right to unionize. He created the minimum wage. He created unemployment insurance. He fought and won against Nazis in World War II, even though he was so disabled by polio that he hadn't walked in decades. This is the guy who saved America. And as you'll hear, it was as if FDR could see Donald Trump using the big lie today, which makes perfect sense because FDR fought with his own Nazis and fascists in America in the 1930s and 1940s. They even tried to assassinate him, but were stopped by brave Marine General Smedley Butler. Roosevelt knew them. He knew who they were. And in this clip, I think he's warning us as well as the auto workers that he was talking to. This was a speech in the 1940s, in 1944, before the United Auto Workers. He knew that these fascists would never go away, and the big lie would never go away. In fact, we've always been under attack by fascists. You know, the Confederacy in 1859 became a full-blown fascist state with meaningless elections and a handful of super-rich families controlling the entire southern half of the country. It took the death of 620,000 Americans to resolve that one and ensure democracy could continue in America. So now you've got Donald Trump. He's running a campaign that's supposedly all about attacking a judge in his criminal case, but is really designed to deliver a vivid and unmistakable message to potential witnesses and jurors. What Donald Trump is saying to them is, see what I can do? I could even send my brown shirts against a federal judge and his daughter with complete impunity. Imagine the kind of damage I could do to you and members of your family if you testify against me or as a juror hold me guilty for the crimes I'm accused of. This is trial interference. There's a legal term for it. Say it again? No. This is Donald Trump is trying to interfere in his trial. He's trying to bias the jury or terrify the jury, and he's trying to bias or terrify potential witnesses against him. It looks like he's going after the judge, and of course he's doing that, but he's going after the judge by way of saying, hey, I can go after the top guy. Imagine what I can do to you. So, and by the way, to punctuate this threat, you know, don't forget Roy Den Hollander. You've forgotten about Roy Den Hollander? That's because, unlike Republicans, Democrats don't talk about the same thing over and over and over again, but frankly, they should. Roy Den Hollander was a guy who in 2016 phone banked for Donald Trump from Trump Tower, according to himself. He wrote a letter to Donald Trump complaining that because of Democrats, I can't wear my red Make America Great Again hat in the streets of New York City. So in 2020, 4 years later, Judge Esther Salas was assigned the trial of Jeffrey Epstein and Deutsche Bank, which could have exposed Donald Trump's involvement with Epstein and with Deutsche Bank. And 3 days after the judge accepted the case, Roy Den Hollander wrote on social media that she was, quote, a lazy and incompetent Latina judge appointed by Obama. The next day, he shows up at her front yard, at her front doorstep. Knocks on the door. Her son answers the phone. Daniel Anderl is his name. He's 20 years old. He answers the door, and Roy Den Hollander shoots him in the chest and kills him. This Trump supporter kills the son of the judge. This is I mean, you may have forgotten about this. This was 4 years ago. You may have forgotten about this. But I guarantee you, she was a federal judge. Every federal judge in America has not forgotten about it. That this judge's son was targeted by Trump. Well, actually, he wasn't so much targeted by Trump. She just kind of got in the way. Now, imagine what could be done to the daughter of a judge who is targeted by Trump. Sonny, here's what Franklin Roosevelt had to say about this.
The opposition in this year has already imported into this campaign a very interesting thing because it's fun. They have imported the propaganda technique invented by the dictators abroad. Remember, a number of years ago, there was a book, Mein Kampf, written by Hitler himself. The technique was all set out in Hitler's book, and it was copied by the aggressors of Italy and Japan. According to that technique, you should never use a small falsehood, always a big one, for its very fantastic nature would make it more credible. If only you keep repeating it over and over and over again.
But then he continues. You've all heard this clip, but then he continues.
Well, let's take some simple illustrations that come to mind. For example, although I rubbed my eyes when I read it, we have been told that it was not a Republican depression, but a Democratic depression, from which this nation was saved in 1933. That this administration, this one, today, is responsible for all the suffering and misery that the history books and the American people have always thought had been brought about during the 12 ill-fated years when the Republican Party was in power.
And he continues from there with a great story.
Now, there's an old and somewhat lugubrious adage which says, never speak of a rope in the house of a man who's been hanged. In the same way, if I were a Republican leader speaking to a mixed audience, the last word in the whole dictionary that I would think of using is that word depression.
So there you go. I mean, this is FDR telling us, here's the strategy to take down somebody using the big lie, which is to ridicule them, to point it out and ridicule it. And, it worked for FDR. They continued calling it the Republican Great Depression. And he beat the Republicans. He ran for office 4 times and won each time. He served 3.5 terms as president of the United States. And of course, that's why Republicans got together and, passed an amendment saying that you can only have 2 terms, which, by the way, Republicans are now talking about if Trump gets reelected, they want to do away with that amendment to the Constitution so Trump can serve a 3rd or 4th term.